And yes, so now we will start with the keynotes. And first we have Magdalena Budziszewska. She's working at the University of Warsaw. She's a researcher in psychology, and she will have a presentation about climate change education for academia, please. Bridging knowledge, emotional and behavioral gaps on the road to social change. So Magdalena, please, the floor is yours.
So welcome, thank you for having me. Today I'm in Warsaw in the Faculty of Psychology at Warsaw University. This is the building you can see in my background. And I try to share my screen. Okay, and okay. Can you see my slides now? Okay, so I'm going to talk about climate change education in academic context. So what we can do about the need to educate people from the perspective of being in academia. Background behind this is that in the Warsaw University, we started an initiative which was Warsaw University for Climate. I actually chaired this initiative. And we wanted to kind of mobilize our university, Warsaw University, to find way to contribute to climate change work in a positive way. And we did quite lots of work about this. And one thing we came with is that actually education is one of the most important things we can do. And in my talk, I will talk very shortly about something I call knowledge gap, that people actually don't have, despite all the media and everything, don't seem to have enough knowledge, and also about some emotional aspects, psychology, and very shortly about some behavioral aspects. And then I will tell what one can do about this, but also what we have already done about this, because this is maybe the most interesting thing, the things that were actually done. It's much harder to actually do something than just to imagine what should be done. Okay, let's start with knowledge. In Poland, which is quite a large country in the middle of Europe, in the year 2019, there was something like a national quiz on a climate knowledge, being actually a representative sample pool in all adult Polish citizens, which quite large. They have like 6,000 people on this quiz. So this was really a representative study. And in this quiz, they demonstrated that climate worry is common. Actually, nearly 90% of Polish citizens worry about climate change and experience anxiety and emotions about this and don't know what to do. But they also tested knowledge. By tested, they asked questions which have like this right and false answers. And they demonstrated that actually more than a half of citizens have very like large misconceptions about climate change. For example, 60% of people believe that climate change might be just something as a natural cycle, or nearly 60% of Polish citizens in this study, they believe that global warming and air pollution, which is in Poland, of course, a very big problem and one that takes a lot of awareness, but they believe this was the same thing, which is of course not true. We don't have the same causes. It's like you believe it's not greenhouse gases that causes climate change, but more this kind of pollution you can see, like this dark dust in the air. But that's what people on the street believe. And also this study was next year replicated also with a representative sample. So we pretty much know that people are very worried about climate change, but they actually don't seem to have enough knowledge. I think this kind of result could be similar in like Eastern and maybe Central Europe. So in places like I don't know, Ukraine or Belarus, it would be probably different for Sweden or Finland. The main difference being we don't really have in Poland a decent climate change education at school. So when we test people, they didn't have the opportunity to actually learn this at school. Actually, last year we did also like a review of Polish school handbooks, and there is a lot of mistakes or not updated knowledge in school handbook. And of course, you all know we have also a lot of misinformation in public spheres with politicians and people like that saying, well, we don't know about climate change. So this amount of misinformation causes that we actually do have in our Central Eastern Europe a society that is worried about climate change, but don't have enough knowledge. So that's our knowledge gap. Also in this study, maybe an interesting result was that actually nearly nothing predicted action on climate change. For example, people were really worried, some were anxious, but anxiety or worry did not really predict intentions to take action on climate change. But actually, knowledge was related to that. And of course, this is correlational. So we think it may be people who actually take some action or climate change, they also have more knowledge. It's not so simple that knowledge causes action. We know from other psychological studies that actually it's not so simple, but for sure knowledge would help. And last year I did a similar study with university students with a non-representative sample of Warsaw University students, and I really expected students to be better because they were not representative, they were young people, they were coming from school, and most of these students were actually interested in the topic of climate change. And to my really surprise, I basically replicated the results of Polish population. So our students, being 19, our first year students, coming from Polish school, they also nearly have no knowledge about climate change, which points to the fact that actually we don't have, and we really would need a school education, but changing school education is a process that needs lots of time, and at least in Poland is quite political. So it's not so easy to say, okay, let's do some climate education at school. Which is my main point today, that it's probably universities who should do this. I don't know about other countries. In Poland, it's up to 80% of young people who study. So nearly everybody goes to some form or higher education, which gives us a chance when we want to reach these people to do some education in university context. But what does it mean to know about climate change? What is this knowledge? Because that's not so easy. That's not only question about carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases. And as you probably know, we can have knowledge about causes, about mechanism, about consequences and solutions to climate change. It's often claimed in education that solutions are the most important part. But also there are different things like the magnitude, the global character, the time space, the feedback loop, and also social, psychological, and economic mechanisms involved in it. So to make a long story short, I show this picture, and this is a picture from actually a book and an open course we did about climate change as a result of all of this. But I want you to have a look. It's in Polish, but to have a look at this beautiful network here, because our idea of climate change education is that this is about complexity, and it's not only the complexity of the climate system itself, so this physical and biological part, but also the complexity of social, psychological, economic influences and how this all works together. So understanding this complexity, or this huge thing that climate change is, to speak with Timothy Morton, is a hyper object or something so big that I'm nearly tempted to believe that to have a really deep education about climate change is similar to taking our students to understand, for example, how the modern society and how everything works together. So it's a kind of everything problem. So it's complex in education, but it's also nice in university context because we can teach complexity. And there is not much understanding about this. If you look at traditional education, often called sustainability education, and how it works at school. So there was also some studies on this, and people get from this education things like they need to do some recycling and not to use too much plastic, and they save water. In the study I mentioned, they asked people in Poland what they do about global warming. And they got basically two answers, that people try not to use plastic and that people try to save water. Unfortunately, that's not the best actions to stop climate change, even if we go to believe that this is a problem of individual action, which it is not, but basically that's very shallow understanding. And also we know from psychology that once you have a behavioral appeal at people, so you tell people what to do, they kind of stop to listen. They're not going to understand indeed what we want with this climate change education, but say, okay, this is about recycling. We have to, I don't know, use less plastic. Okay, that's it. So it's pretty much stops thinking. But when you look at the studies, what they teach at Polish school and what people get from all this education is basically save water and don't use plastic message, which is a failure. We need to go deeper than that and to kind of get people first to understand how things work together. This is in Polish, but basically in the work we did, we collected, I believe, 18 people, scientists from different disciplines, being physics, biology, economy, psychology, and also things about energy, and brought them together to demonstrate how these things are interconnected, and basically wrote a course material and a handbook with was authored by our collaborators, by Polish scientists, most of them from the Warsaw University, but also from other places. Okay, so let's stop with knowledge and say something about emotions. There are not only intellectual challenges to understanding climate change, there is a lot of emotional processes going on. And I said we need to bring people to understand the complexity and the scale of climate change. But once you understand this is actually pretty threatening. So I made a few notes about this. For example, it threatens our sense of a personal and collective safe future. Future becomes much more unsafe once you understand the magnitude of climate change. That's a fact. It also threatens the sense of personal knowledge about the world, our knowledge systems, because it's often challenging to existing ideologies, worldviews, and identities. So once you have an identity of someone who, I don't know, enjoys modern civilization and enjoys your car, which is hard to enjoy at the moment in Poland because our fuel prices are skyrocketing, and you know, people are proud is that this kind of things, they basically build identities and are often also connected to ideologies. And once you understand what kind of problem climate change is, then it can be pretty challenging to this kind of things. Also, it pretty much threatens a sense of personal efficacy, because the most common reaction is that people say we can do nothing about this. We are kind of powerless. What can I contribute to this? This is a too big problem. And people are motivated, we know this in psychology, to avoid the sense of powerlessness at all costs. So we defend basically against this. Also, a sense of collective pride. Collective means in groups like nations. or even humanity is also an emotional challenge. For example, Poland is a carbon-intense economy with a tradition of having coal. So this coal mining could be part of Polish identity, and there were people that were proud in this. And once you learn about global warming, how are you proud about being from a country which has one of the most carbon-intense energy systems in the whole Europe? So it's difficult to feel proud about your nation, but it's also difficult to feel proud about being human once confronted with this knowledge. There is a sense of moral injury because we are kind of all participating in this. And as a psychologist, you know that how limited options are actually not to participate. We basically cannot cancel our participation in this. It's not so simple. You can have maybe, I don't know, lessen your personal carbon impact, but that's not nearly enough. So a little bit of guilty feeling is included in this, and people are also motivated to avoid guilt. So there is a sort of unspoken ambivalence about this theme. And in this context, Sally Weintraub, she's a British psychoanalyst, speaks that we basically are, all of us are in a sort of soft denial about this. And her idea is that we basically need each other, so need these collective processes to help us to move forward with this topic. And I will skip emotions and share my presentation later to be on time, but as a short joke or break, so we say climate education, but people can often find climate education pretty traumatizing. I teach a lot of students about this, and students have this, okay, let's torture us a little bit with this climate change thing. So they clearly experience this as confronting themselves with something difficult, and you just sometimes need to take a break from this. So I will skip this, and to finish on time, what can we do or what we have done about all of this? I still believe education is one of the most important things we could do. Remember, 60% of Polish people really mix climate change with air pollution in general. So there is lots to do in terms of knowledge. And as a university, we offer a lot of specialized knowledge, but there is also a need for basic knowledge. And I believe we need to target everybody with this, including university staff, academics, and yourself, not only our students. And we actually did this. We offered the climate change course online for co-workers, for our university staff, and 100 people subscribed to this in Warsaw University, which is both a lot and not so much. Warsaw University, together with students and staff, is, I believe it's 50,000 people, is the biggest employer in Warsaw area. So when I say we could target also our staff and also academics, these are large numbers of people, and this is important because these are people who educate others. Also, we did a course of this for PhD students, and quite naturally, it was the first thing we did. We did an online course for students with all this material we prepared. And also we aim to target future and active teachers. We have this year like an online course for school teachers in Warsaw area. So basically we're trying to give this basic knowledge to everybody, focusing on teacher mostly, and not to wait for our government or anybody to do this for us, because we think there is not enough time. So it should be now. And we believe, because there is a lot of engaged teachers, both in academia and at school, that once teachers have the resources, they are going to do this. So, but teachers are important. Also, as university, we teach teachers. We have lots of programs for teachers. In the university, we need to teach the actual science and to teach the complexity of this, and also teach the uncomfortable part of it, and provide reflexive spaces, which I mean we need to include humanities in this. And also while underway, use the power of community and relationship and nature, because it's a difficult theme. And what we do as a fact here is that we basically have teams or friends, both among university teachers and people who are active in this, like small communities who work together between different faculties to move things forward. And we also started some students organizations and do the same work with students, trying to also get students to educate other students, organize things for them. So it's very simple concept, but I think it's very much needed because academia might be, at least in Poland, one of the few institutions who are free enough and also flexible enough to actually do this kind of thing pretty fast. And as my last point, there is a website with all our course material. It is an online course and an open access book and a website with films and material. It's pretty much our Klimatyczne ABC, which we are going to translate with Climate Change 101. It's sort of introduction. It's very beautiful. It looks like this. This is, for example, a page from this, where we talk about climate change myths and facts and common misconception and climate science. Okay, so this is like a resource we created, and then we use it in education in all this context. This is going to be translated in English, and we hope, because it's in Polish now, obviously, and it was also much more needed in Poland than elsewhere, because I believe there is much more in English-speaking countries than in our country. But we are going to translate this into English now, and I think in terms of Baltic University program, we could make all of this available for you and collaborate with you, because it was a lot of work from many people done. And this is also a handbook which is going to be used more or less as a handbook at school level. So we are also really aiming not only universities, but also high schools with this. So thank you for listening to my talk. That was my last slide. And this is Białowieża Forest at Spring. Yeah.